All right, everyone, we're getting ready to start our monthly board meeting of the Board of Elections. We're going to formally call this meeting to order. Our second agenda, we have our invocation by Dr. Coors. He will.
Let us pray. Lord, just be with us today on this holiday of St. Patrick. We ask you to watch over us, to guide us, to give us the wisdom we need to benefit the citizens of Dougherty County, to be able to make decisions that is the best for all concerned. Be with us and guide our thoughts. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Dr. Coors. Item number 3 is approval of the minutes of the last meeting. The board has had our opportunity to review those minutes. If you have had an opportunity to review, what do we hear?
Move for approval of the last minutes meeting as circulated.
Okay, it's been moved and second that the minutes be approved with no corrections. All in favor, let me know by aye. Aye. Those opposed by the same sign. Then the minute stands approved. Item number 4, explanation of discussion, Attorney Tommy Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I appreciate the chance to come before you today, even though I regret the circumstances. We all know that Milton Griffin, affectionately known as Junebug throughout our community, passed away on about a month ago today. Actually, it's on February the 17th. And Mr. Griffin's passing, it creates a vacancy on the Dougherty County Board of Education. We have a special act that governs that in Dougherty County. It was passed in 1987. It says there'll be a special election in the event that the term of the person vacating an office, in this case by passing away, is more than a year. And so we are required to call a special election. We passed this resolution declaring the vacancy at the last board meeting, and it's been presented to you. I think you all have a copy, and we would respectfully request that you call an election to fill this vacancy in District 2 on the Dougherty County Board of Education. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have, unless you have some questions about this.
Well, I don't personally. Do anyone have any questions at this time?
Questions?
All right, if no question, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the resolution as presented from the Dougherty County Board of Education and call for a special election to fill the seat left by the death of Mr. Milton Junebug Griffin.
Second.
Motion and second that we adopt it and call for a special election. All in favor, let me know by aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Then, Attorney Coleman, we will be glad to facilitate this election and bill you at cost.
Anything we can do to assist you, and Ms. Nicholson, we'd be glad to do. Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Turn it over to Ms. Dan.
Thank you, Bishop Williams. At this time, we will have set aside some time for public comment, and if you are desirous of making public comment, then we'll ask that you would step to the podium, introduce yourself, and we will receive your public comments. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can everyone hear me? I'll take my mask off just in case. My name is Amna Faruqi. I'm coming to you today as the interim president of the Albany-Dougherty branch of the NAACP. I've been here before, so it's good to see you guys again, but I think this is the first time I'm coming to speak since the elections that we had in November and January. As you all know, the NAACP is one of the oldest and most legacied organizations dedicated to voting and civil rights, and this current generation of this branch sees it as our responsibility to continue that fight for voter engagement, voter turnout, and most importantly, for voter protection. I'm here today because I wanted to talk specifically about legislation that's been introduced in the Georgia Legislative Assembly that would implement measures that would make it harder for people in Dougherty County to vote, specifically black voters, and make it harder for black voters to vote. These past elections, we saw record turnout for the Senate runoff and the presidential race in Georgia, and high turnout in Dougherty County, which was extremely humbling considering that we were and still are in the middle of a pandemic. It took the whole community, neighbors reminding each other to vote, poll workers who were on the front lines working long hours to make sure the election ran, and people who were providing rides and organizations in our coalition that were doing a lot of work to get out the vote. We were happy that the county and this board was able to provide drop boxes at 4 different locations and do their part to make voting more accessible and easier. And because of those drop boxes, people were able to actually get their absentee ballots in on time if they didn't trust the Postal Service to deliver them effectively. Moving the early voting location to the Civic Center was a success. People did not have to wait in long lines in bad weather like they did at the Candy Room. They were able to vote more quickly, and all of this was able to happen because of outside grant money to the tune of more than $200,000 that the county was able to receive and put towards the elections process. The legislation introduced and passed in the Georgia Assembly threatens all of that. House Bill 531 has now passed on a party line vote in the Georgia House, pushed by Republican legislators. It will move to the Senate Ethics Committee, and it would restrict drop box access, add new ID requirements for mail voting, restrict weekend voting, specifically Sunday voting and souls to the polls, and criminalize volunteers for handing out food and water to voters waiting in line for 2 to 8 hours. I was here a few months ago, and I said it then, you know, that first day of early voting in October where the line was the longest. We had a lot of people come up to us and tell us that if it wasn't for volunteers providing shade, food, and water, they would not have been able to cast their ballot. And so we know that the role of volunteers is also important. The Senate Bill 241, which has also passed the Georgia Senate and is now headed to the Special Committee on Election Integrity, would allow dangerous legislative takeovers of local boards of elections such as this one, add more ID requirements to voting by mail as well, and add millions in potential taxes to cover unfunded mandates that counties have received to do voter education, and take away the ability of counties to receive outside grant money that would help fund these initiatives. It would create a new voter fraud tip line when we know that voter fraud is statistically not even significant. It would push voter prosecutions more to the Attorney General and more. This is one of the most restrictive voting proposals introduced and passed in the history of this country, and its provisions, especially since Jim Crow, and its provisions would allow legislators to take over the state elections board and oust local elections officials, which threatens our democracy and would allow people to threaten to decertify election results and continue to push the narrative of fraud. There were a lot of businesses calling for stop the steal and alleging voter fraud this past January and November. Those challenges and allegations, some of them came from Southwest Georgia, but they were across the country, and they ultimately led to a violent insurrection at our nation's capital. And we saw people carrying nooses and Confederate flags, calling for leaders to be hung because they did not like that Donald Trump didn't win. We see those same Confederate flags all the time here, every day in Southwest Georgia, and it's that same spirit that is now trying to suppress voters from coming out, and specifically targeting Black voters in retaliation for how the election went. You know, retaliation is common in response to high turnout. Jim Crow happened in response to high numbers of registrations of Black voters in the late 1860s. Mass incarceration increased after the civil rights movement. You know, when Black people turn out, when Black communities organize, there is retaliation from the government, and these restrictive measures introduced are just the latest version of that. You know, Dr. Price-Gore, I saw an article that you wrote, in the Herald a few months ago, and you mentioned Reverend Dr. King and how he stood for judging a man by his character and not necessarily his race. And that's certainly true in the kind of leader that he was. But he also would have fought against these measures, and he talked specifically about the danger of people who consider themselves moderate and are white standing in the way of measures that make voting easier. And he talked specifically about people clearing the path for justice and for liberation for his people and for all people. So I think we should ask ourselves, why would someone want to add more requirements to make it harder to vote? Why take away drop boxes? Why add more photo ID? Why implement all of these measures, if only for the reason that you don't want people to vote? So I know that the people on this board are not legislators in the Georgia Assembly, but I'm asking that you speak out against these bills, and that even though they've passed, whatever happens with them now moving through ethics committees, and if the governor signs them, that this board commits to measures that will make voting easier, more fair, and more just, because it takes an entire community to execute an election. It takes the elections office, who we're grateful to, and also our part in the community to make sure people vote, but we have to make that process easier if we actually want to see people come out and vote. So that's why I'm here today, and thank you.
All right. Thank you. Ms.
Are you
Amna.
open to questions?
Okay.
Sunday's paper. Hope all of you saw it. It inspired me to go back and do a little research on Senate Bill 241 and House Bill 351. And I'll be honest with you, there's some things that I do not like in either one, but there are some things that I do like in them. I don't agree that it's voter suppression. We have to turn everything into, we're trying to keep somebody from voting because they're black, or because they're white, or because they're Hispanic. We want all legitimate voters to vote. That's what I do in my role on this board, and I've only been to 2 meetings, but that's what I want to strive for. This year we had all these third parties sending out, I must have gotten 10 different postcards handwritten about voting, and they were all dedicated voting for Warnoff and Ossoff. I mean, it was all slanted in that direction. My point is, I read this is slanted a little bit here as well, and you didn't quite tell all the details. Yes, I think that if you vote in person, you need to have a picture ID. But absentee balloting, I read I guess it was House Bill 351, it said you have to show proof of residence. You don't have to have a photo ID. You don't have to have a photo ID to vote with an absentee. You can send a copy of your power bill showing that you live there. It bothers me a little bit. Everything today in today's press, whether it's in high school football, as we've seen recently with a coach in South Georgia, it's all about winning. It's not about legitimate winning. And I want legitimate winning to be and I want every person who's legitimate to have a right to vote. I don't want to be at the polls that night and say we won, but have any smoke behind us. I want all that smoke cleared, and I want legitimate voters. And so I would encourage, I brought this with me because I want to encourage all of y'all to go to the Georgia government website and read the real bill, because there's more to it than this lady. I mean, I don't view it as a voter suppression. I view it as a voter basically clearing out and making sure that we have the right voters voting. Now, I didn't read the Senate bill when I read the House bill, and I'll admit that. But I plan to do more research on it and look at it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't agree with all that was in the House bill. And I do think there's some things that were tightened down that I don't really like as much either. So we all need to have our voice on that. But I just want the whole story told. And there are a lot of things of what you said I do agree with, but don't you want to make sure that the people, that everybody has a chance to vote one time, one man, one vote, okay? And that everybody has a chance to do that, and that they're legitimate. That's what I want.
Right. And I think that's what we're also about. We're doing this because we want every person who is, a citizen registered to vote, who can vote, should be able to vote. I guess I would just say, the question of legitimate versus illegitimate, there actually are not, and maybe this is just a point we disagree on, there actually are not illegitimate voters voting. And the idea, that voter fraud is happening, that there are legitimate voters and illegitimate voters, is just not, no study has proven that. Studies that have been done on voter fraud and, illegitimate voters show that it is so small statistically, that it is insignificant. When you go to the poll to vote, if you are not a registered voter, you don't show up in the system. And so it is not possible to cast a ballot that is illegitimate. So of course we are fighting for that. Every person who is registered to vote, casts their ballot and is able to vote. And the reason that, we bring race into it is because these measures disproportionately impact Black and brown people who might not have ID, might not have photo ID. And so that's why we talk about that, and so we bring that in. But definitely, like, the one person, one vote is what we're fighting for.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Faruqi. Thank you.
Greetings to all,
Greetings.
and my name is William Wright, and I'm president of Tramtech Incorporated, Conseco Incorporated, and I served as president of NAACP in Albany, Georgia for about 30 years. And one of the things we have to be clear about, what Dr. Core said, all you have to do is look at March 7, 1965, at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Now, you and him bull skated, but the crux of the matter is the Republicans want it both ways. It cannot be fair only when you win. That's a lie and deceit, and you shouldn't be doing that. But some people here are not going to stand for it. You don't need to put no more burden. Look at Bloody Sunday, March 7, 1965, and see how 600 black people were beat down like they were dogs with billy clubs, horses, nightsticks, everything, just because our boys and girls were going to Vietnam and everywhere else in the world that the United States was, because they wanted to exercise a right to vote. My father served in the Marine Corps. When he came back from Korea, he said when they was at the camp trying to look at a movie, the Korean POWs sat in the front and can look at the movie before they could. Here he is fighting 10,000 miles away for something he couldn't exercise here back home. And then you come over here with this mess about this is not right. The only reason you're doing that is because you want it both ways. You cannot have, the law is either the law or it's not. You cannot place all these burdens. And we know that it's really is not in your court. It's going to take the federal government to decide the rules for elections like they've done and almost everything else. That's the only time it gets ready. You'll say one thing, but I don't know if you looked at it, but I looked at Meet the Press this past Sunday. Jeff Duncan was the only white person I have seen that told the truth about it. He got on Meet the Press and said, you all need to stop bull skating, be right, and realize you got to take a different strategy to try to win the White House back. That's what Jeff Duncan said. And he was right. Don't be coming here with this mess about this, that, and the other, when you know that it's simply not the truth. You cannot have it both ways. The law is not good for one group, and then when you lose, it's bad. We got to put all of these barriers and roadblocks and this kind of thing. That's just a lie, and it's fraudulent on your part to do that. Well, to try to do it, because we had some contact with the Senate Majority Leader, Shubin, Raphael Warnock, and Ossoff, and Congressman Sanford Bishop. We sent this information back to them back in December about we need to do something about the Voting Rights Act. See, if Section 5 of the Voting Rights was still in place, you wouldn't be cutting the food like you are now. It would block all that, because you would have to go through that pre-clearing. And I'm telling you, there's a chance that it's coming back. When we talked with their employees up there in D.C., they said they're already working on that bill. So all this bullshit you're doing, you can talk about this and that and what Joe is going to do and what. When they get that bill cleared up, I'm talking about in D.C., not the mess you all do down here, you're going to see that you're not going to be able to do this anymore. You simply cannot have it the way you want it, and it's only right when the Republicans and rich white people win. See, we got people that look like myself who still in the military, fighting for a right, and you all cutting the fool here want to take that right away. What kind of America is this supposed to be? They can go 10,000 miles away and fight for a right for far enough, and then you come here and say, we're going to put a roadblock in front of you. And then you want somebody to go and give up that life. I mean, that's crazy. And it's nonsense for you to stand up here and bullskate and say, I want it to be fair. What the heck you think it's been all the time? Now, I'm through. I answering the question.
Yes, sir.
Just look at March 7, 1965. Go to YouTube. It's on there. Bloody Sunday. 600 black people beat like they were dogs just because they wanted to cast their vote. Just look at that, and then you come in and see if you can still come to the same mess. I'll answer any questions if you have it.
Thank you, Mr. Wright.
I do want to say one thing to you because you kept looking at me, and that is that this is not 1965, and I'm sorry for the things that happened in 65, but I had no control then. This is 2021, and that's what I have some control over the future. So I agree with all of what you said in that regard.
All right, thank you. Is there any other public comment?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, members of the board. What I really just want to make clear, and I'm not going to be too long, is that, this board made some significant strides in terms of making the vote, the right to vote, and the process to vote much easier on Dougherty County as last year. The measures that you all were a part of and the things that the staff had done made it possible for a record turnout for all of Dougherty County, black folks, white folks, Republicans, Democrats, and that's what this board needs to strive for. Initiating drop boxes in the midst of COVID, that was something that helped the people. People didn't want to come out. People didn't want to be around, standing in line, hoping they didn't catch the virus to cast their votes. The money that was utilized to open up the Civic Center so people wouldn't have to stand in the cold and the rain or the heat of the sun helped. These are things that are trying to be eliminated by this House Bill 31. On Tuesday, I issued a testimonial by written letter to the Georgia State Legislature, and it just basically reads that these are the things that have helped Dougherty County out. If we look at some of these measures, it's going to cost statewide almost $30 million. We have spent significant money in placing those drop boxes with cameras, with fiber optic cabling that has been put in the ground, and it can't come out. It's permanent. So if drop boxes and those things go the way of the world, we've wasted money. We've wasted our time. We've wasted resources. So I hope that the board is of the mind that we want to make things easier for the voters of Dougherty County. That's what we should be concerned with. I understand, the argument that we should have fair elections or we should have election integrity, but the simple fact of the matter is there is no voter fraud. That has been said by the governor, that has been said by the Secretary of State, that has been said by our own district attorney here in Albany, who is a member of the governor's election fraud committee. There is no voter fraud. So there's no justification for what's going on in any of the bills, other than you want to suppress voters. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Young. If no one else is coming, let me thank everyone for your public comment. Because the time is sort of spent, I will not, but I will share that we've gotten at least one email from a citizen, Ms. Pace. I did take the opportunity to talk to Ms. Pace. Her concerns were very much what has been expressed by everyone who has stood here and really wants to know, will this board take a position for or against the legislation that has been put forth? I did not speak for the board. I did speak for myself. Since I am a Democratic committee appointee, so of course we are adamantly opposed to any of these bills. We think that the voter integrity argument is a farce and is not true. And so anyway, we had a lively discussion. No one else from the board reached out to her, so I did. That ends my public comment portion.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank everyone that had comments today. Thank you for coming and being part of us. We're going to go to item number 6 on our agenda,
We're going to talk about the vote that just took place. The board just voted to hold the special election. We know that the Secretary of State sets those dates for special elections in the election calendar. And the next available election date is Tuesday, June the 15th, 2021. June the 15th, 2021. The code section states that qualifying, it has to run a minimum of 2.5 days. So we will work to establish the qualifying dates, make sure that they are properly announced. The cutoff date for registration for that election is May 17th. There will also still be the 3 weeks of advance voting for that election as required by law. So we will be working in the office to ensure that everything is facilitated. Of course, qualifying will take place in the elections office due to it being a special election. Parties will not qualify the candidate. We will advertise that as such, and the qualifying fee we know is $90. There are 6 precincts in District 2, just 6. Precinct 10, Mount Zion Church. Precinct 11, Alice Coachman. Precinct 12, Carver Teen Center. Precinct 18, I think we'll still be utilizing the Morningside Elementary School. Precinct 19, Radium Middle School. Precinct 26, Lamar Reese. So those are our 6 precincts that will be eligible for this election. Absentee voting, everything will take place as per any other election.
Are we there? That would be
Yes.
it?
Oh, only other thing that we want to mention, make sure, as was already noted by everyone else, we were watching the legislation before we came into meeting. They are being live streamed. So they were talking about Senate Bill 241, and it is House Bill 531.
Right. Okay, thank you. Item number 7 is our future planning. Do we have anything on future planning as of now, something the board would like to bring forth?
I did include in everybody's packet the information that I emailed to you in reference to the precincts, the registered voters, and the voter turnout for November. I did include that. So, but other than that, I do not have anything, sir. If you all want to discuss that at a later time frame, we just want to make sure that we're mindful of the time with First Christian not allowing us to come back, or Westover Community Church as it is called currently. We need to make sure we have a location in place before qualifying in August, because that is one of the precincts in that election. There is a commissioner in that at that ward.
Right.
So we need to make sure, but that's it.
Okay. Well, board members have any other future planning you want to bring forth? Anyone else? You do? No? Okay.
Give us time to look at it.
Okay. Yeah, on that, give us a little time to review, and we'll get to it on the next meeting. Other business, are there any other business which we need to discuss today? Kamika?
Yes, we agreed that every board meeting, we would attempt to discuss different topics for education purpose.
Mm-hmm.
This month, we're going to cover NCOA notices and no contact notices. NCOA confirmation notice, also called National Change of Address, are derived from a list of voters who have changed their address with the United States Postal Service, which is provided to the Secretary of State's office. Voters who appear to have moved outside their current county or within their current county are generated a confirmation notice that is sent to the county registrar's office to be mailed to their voters. The address printed on the confirmation notice is the address that is currently on the electors list in ENET. And as we discussed at our last meeting, ENET is the Georgia voter registration system that counties use to update their electors list. The timeline, postage reports are generally provided by the Secretary of State's office to county registrars at the end of April. The reports provide an estimate postage, cost of postage. Confirmation notices are printed by a third-party vendor and are generally shipped during the month of May. All notices must have the same postmark date. The Secretary of State office establishes that date. The 40-day clock begins after that date. After the 40 days, all outstanding confirmation notices for voters who moved out of county will be moved from active to an inactive status systematically. All right, here's a NCOA that was used in the past of voters who submitted their change of address to the United States Postal Service that were out of county. So the green, the red rectangle, it is surrounding the barcode, which is tied to the voter's registration number. So it has the voter's name, and it also says out of county NCOA. This confirmation notice is a within county NCOA. It's the same as the out of county NCOA. The only difference here is that it asks the voter if their address is the same. If it is the same, then they do not have to complete the NCOA. If it is different, then they can complete this NCOA, or they can scan the QR code and submit their registration changes online on the online portal. Office tips. Verify that the individual that completed the notice is the intended recipient. So if the form was completed by the unintended registered voter, we would make a note of it on the mailer side of the confirmation notice. So we would cross out the registered voter's information, and we'll put the information of the voter who completed the notice. If the form was completed by an individual who is not registered, we will mail that individual a registration application and a letter of instruction. So they can't use the NCOA to register. During processing, each confirmation notice is processed as it is received in the county's registrar office or via the online portal. If the NCOA is received in our office as a change, we will make the change in ENET. If there is no change, we would put in ENET that we received the NCOA, but there was no change. If it was return mail, we would put in that we received the NCOA as return mail. County registrars proceed to forward the confirmation notices to various counties if the voter moved out of county. Each return mail confirmation notice is processed accordingly. If we receive the confirmation notice with yellow sticker with an address on it, we would forward that address forward the notice to the voter that has that address on it. If the yellow sticker has no address, then we will process it as return mail. So once we process as return mail, they would get a no contact confirmation notice. So if no response is received, the voter is moved to an inactive status to the reason of, as a reason of no contact. The term no contact means that the voter has not completed an updated registration card, has not signed a petition, nor has they voted in the 3 preceding calendar years. The Secretary of State's office prints the confirmation notice as required by Georgia law in section 1973 GG-6 of the National Voter Registration Act. The notice is postage prepaid and includes a pre-addressed return card on which the voter may state his or her current address. Voters can also make changes to their voting record via the Secretary of State's online portal. All right, for list maintenance, any correspondence received from the voter is entered into the Georgia voter registration system. Their status will be updated from an inactive voter status to an active voter status. So if they sign a petition that's allowed by law, they change their name or their address, they complete a voter certificate on election day, they complete an absentee ballot application that's absentee by mail or absentee in person. If they do a written confirmation of their current address or any other written contact that contains a registration confirmation. Once a record is moved to an inactive status, and if there are no updates to the record through 2 general federal elections that are even years, the voter status is changed from inactive status to a canceled status systematically, with the reason no activity for 2 general elections. Once the record is moved to a council status, the individual would be required to complete a new voter registration application to register to vote. And that's all I have, Chairman.
Okay.
Okay, any questions?
Yes.
One question, I do. Go ahead.
Andy.
Once a voter has filled out the National Change of Address, NCOA, then our Secretary of State mailed something, and I was unclear. I kind of read it where it said, if this is your correct address, do nothing. If this is incorrect, please reply. Is the address they're asking for confirmation of, do nothing if this is correct, is that the new address we've been given? It may be out of county, within county, or is that their previous address? I'm not real, I also have read they send it to both the old address and the new address. Is that what they do?
The last notice that we received was that the address on the confirmation notice is the address that's currently on the electors list.
Meaning before we receive the NCOA or once we receive the NCOA?
Before.
Before, okay. And then it will remain, the old address that will remain unless they write us and tell us otherwise?
Right. So if we, on the NCOA, it is printed with the address that's on the electors list, that's in ENIC. So that address will be on the NCOA and it's mailed to the voter. So the voter has to confirm that that's their address or tell us that they changed the address to their new address that was provided from the United States Postal Service.
Okay.
What, Mr. Ed?
Okay, thank you.
That answer.
Under list maintenance, the 2 federal election cycles, is that equivalent to 3 years, or is it equivalent to 4 years, and is the election cycle depending on the November election or some other election?
So make sure I understand your question. You say is the election cycle depending on the November years?
So if someone's, if you're put into the inactive status, has 4 years passed or has 3 years passed, and is that starting like November, or is it starting in some other federal election
It's the November federal election. It's
November.
every federal election, so that's every 4
Yep.
years, right? Am I correct? Yeah, yes, every 4 years of every federal election, so that'll be 8 years before they are changed to canceled.
Okay, great. 8 years.
8 years total, right?
All right. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
On the slide that was called office tips, in the first bullet, I didn't understand the term unintended registered voter.
Okay, so if we mail you, I mail the address, the confirmation notice to your address, and you no longer live there, but Ms. Middleton lives there. So if Ms. Middleton's fill the confirmation notice out, because the confirmation is blank, the inside of the envelope is blank. So if she fills it out, on the back of that confirmation notice has your registration number on it. So we would cross out your information and we will put Ms. Middleton's name and registration number.
In that case, the NCOA notice and the confirmation information didn't jive, so you're noting that in the office, I guess. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, okay.
Anyone else on the board has a question? If not, thank you, Tamika. That
Thank
was
you.
Very good. Good on-job training. We can use more and more of that. Excellent. Thank you so much. Our next meeting will be April 21st, 2021. Let's please be here and be on time. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.